Hello and welcome to week 3 of Child Development 180. This week we're focusing in on chapters 3 and 16. Again, I'm going to take you through this PowerPoint a little quicker than normal. This is just sort of some touch points on the chapters. Again, you'll want to make sure that you do your assigned reading and then view the entire lecture that is posted in the week 3 module in the course. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so here's our focus this week. It's definitely on families, so we're going to talk about changing families, the effect of the home environment on children, the effect of communication, and assisting families with community resources. This last bullet here will support your work with the community resource assignment. So hopefully you'll see a nice direct connection there, and it will support your work that you're doing as well. So here's some family definitions. I won't read all of them to you word for word, but especially when you're kind of picking up the terminology, the definitions for the week, you'll want to pay special attention to nuclear, extended family, and single parent. So those are the definitions. Again, same information that's in your assigned reading and the full PowerPoint that's in the course. But just for time's sake, I just want to make sure that you key in on those definitions. Here's some more family definitions. So multiracial, single gender, same-sex couples, grandparent, and I know sometimes when we think of the parent or the family, we automatically get one thing in our head, but we have to realize that times have changed, definition of family has changed, and that can look really different from one family to another. I would say too, on the rise, we see more family members who are in the support role of the caregiver at home that's not the actual parent. So we see grandparents, aunts, uncles, even sometimes older cousins who are legal guardians of children. So no matter which home environment you live in, there can be pros and cons, right? So I know sometimes if we think about the home environment, right away we think back to our own lives. So here are some common ones that our text points out for two-parent families. So here's some advantages and disadvantages to that. And that's not to say if there's two parents in the family that it's bad. I don't want you to associate disadvantage with bad, but just some common things that research has pointed out. So here's what the research says. Again, here are the citations, so you can read more about that if you are interested. But the most important factor in children's success in life is growing up in a stable household. I want you to key in on stable household. That doesn't mean that if you have a child that is raised by an uncle, a same-sex couple, an older parent, a single parent, that is in any way negative, or in any way that would not give children the same advantages in life. The research really does point to success of the child and health of the child coming up in a stable household, and that can look really different. Obviously, they're continuing to do research on the effects of divorce on children, so we see kind of along the same lines of some of the effects, but I think as time goes on, we'll learn more and more about that. Again, I don't want you to think that this is a negative thing. Sometimes we think, oh goodness, if the parents get divorced, then the children will never be successful. Or that getting a divorce is worse on a child than two parents that don't get along living together. Obviously, sometimes that is actually the safer and more healthy alternative. So again, I just want to make sure that it's clear that children of divorced families are not being looked at like they're not going to be as healthy or as successful, because that is far from the truth. So here are just kind of some key components that research points out of successful families. So I won't read all of these to you, but communication obviously is a big one. Respecting differences among members is obviously important, and affection. We're hearing more and more about poverty, I think especially with kind of some of the unfortunate times that we've had lately in society. We hear a lot more about poverty being an issue. Did you know that 1 in 6 children live in families whose income is considered below the poverty line? And that's low. So if you want to learn more about poverty lines, you can just do a quick Google search and you will find more information on that. We know that children who live in families that whose income is below the poverty line can commonly suffer from some of these health problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that if a child lives in that family that they will be abused or neglected, or that they will be malnourished or have lots of diseases, but we do know that there are some associations with this, which is all the reason more to make sure that we are doing our part in supporting families, and this is really where those community resources come into play. Just here's some more common things that we see. So academic programs, problems, that can play a role as well. All right, so obviously our focus here is working with children and families. Again, that family component is really key. So we want to do our best to support the bond between parents and children. That's the most important task of a caregiver. So here are some ways that we can support the family. We could communicate frequently. We have to realize that sometimes parents might express anger, or frustration just because of their own fatigue, their own life circumstances. We have to understand that there are differences in family organizations, and they may not necessarily align to kind of our own personal beliefs, but so long as it's not violating laws or child's not getting hurt, we need to put those differences aside and focus in on the health and safety of a child. So some things that we can do are just encouraging families to share, being supportive, communicating, getting information about the children from the parents so that you can better support them, and just really being there if they need you. This week we're focusing in on community resources. So here are just some key points for you here. Lots of community resources. I think sometimes we don't even hear about them so much, but when we start doing a search, I think you'll be surprised at what you can learn is in your direct neighborhood. All right, so intergenerational programs, there are many benefits to these. Here are some possible activities. Bringing children and older people together for mutual benefit is so great. And this will look a little different depending on the child and the setting, but these programs can be really a lot of fun and a really good learning experience for children. So read more about that in the full lecture that's posted. Bringing children, older adolescents, and young adults together can also be really beneficial. Here are some possible activities for that. Again, you can read through more in the full lecture, but these, obviously you'll look at these activities and you'll see they're a little bit different than teaming up children with older adults. That really just has to do with health and sometimes the setting that they're in, and kind of the focus. So it can be a great for not only the children but the older adolescents or young adults to come together and kind of have that relationship where they're spending time together in a really positive way. Here's some examples of community resources. This will help support you when you are doing your assignment for the week. So museums, libraries, just different businesses. You can look into nonprofits as well. Fire station, police station, recreation centers, the list go on and on. You can find both religious and non-religious resources out there as well. So keep your eye out for that when you are starting to do your initial search. A lot of times when we work with children, we're in places where we have volunteers that want to come in, which is fantastic, but with that, obviously, we need to consider the safety of the children, most importantly. So if you are in that role, let's say you're in an administrative role and you need to kind of help create this initial partnership, just some things to think about and do. Preparing a handbook for volunteers, and that would state the expectations and the limits. The boundary issues are really important to keep in there. And you want to have that handbook, and you want to go over with the volunteers specifically and get a signed volunteer form. Obviously, when you have volunteers, you also want to do things like ensure that they've been background checked, and they have all of their health stuff up to date. So you want to ease them in, obviously, at first. So after you've cleared their background and ensured that they are up for the task, you want to assign them simple tasks at first just to get them comfortable and getting to know the children. Obviously, you want to give them an orientation, and obviously you'll want to think about a time commitment from these volunteers. It wouldn't do you much good if you had a volunteer that said, well, I'm moving out of the country in 3 weeks, so I'm just going to volunteer for 3 weeks. You may have them come in for something, but the time it takes for them to get background checked and be cleared might not be worth it for you. So just some things to think about. Obviously, you want to provide ongoing supervision, make sure that you have realistic expectations of the volunteer, and the volunteer has realistic expectations for what they're going to be doing. And then obviously, here's some other bullet points that you'll want to think about, and I would say, kind of wrapping up this, would be thanking the volunteers. Sometimes they spend a lot of their own time and gas money to come volunteer in an organization, and so it's important that we make sure that we thank them. All right, with that, we will wrap up this kind of voiceover quick recap of the main points. Again, make sure you read chapters 3 and 16 in your assigned text, and then view the full lecture and take some time to process and reflect. Thanks, everybody.